The Music Room. Part 3. Well then, the books are something like our books, only the words go the wrong way. I know that because I've held up one of our books to the glass, and then they hold up one in the other room. Lewis Carroll. The question of why mirrors reverse left and right, but not up and down, has been answered. The answer is, they do not reverse left and right or up and down, but front and back. The question of why mirrors apparently reverse left and right, but not up and down, has not been answered. Think about it for a moment. If mirrors do not reverse left and right, or up and down equally, we should be equally susceptible to believing that mirrors reverse up and down, but not left and right. Yet no one seems to be fooled in this way. Why this particular illusion? For that matter, why any illusion that the x and y axis are affected at all if they are not? But are they not? The idea that mirrors do not reverse left and right, or up and down, seems synonymous with asserting that the internal geometric integrity of a reflected form is preserved along these axes. But it is not. Thinking about the double piano, you can probably guess we will talk about symmetry at some point, but not yet. I want to start by demonstrating first that there is an XY consequence in the internal orientation of a reflected form that results from preserving the x and y while reversing the z-axis. I am holding a large clock. I've turned it away from me and towards a wall that has no mirror on it. I can't see the numbers on the other side of the clock or see through the clock, but I know which way I swiveled it around, and I know, I think, where they are. The 12 is still on top and the 6 is at the bottom. I know this because I swung it around horizontally to face the wall, something like a pirouette if you're trying to picture it. And since I did that, in the process of turning it around, I must have swung around the 3 and the 9, reversed them. The 3 is now to my left and the 9 is at my right. The x-axis is reversed, the y is not. Yet I haven't really scrambled the x-axis and y-axis in the object by rotating the clock. After all, I swung the whole clock around. Therefore, I rotated the x-axis around, but also swung the z-axis around too. I reversed everything, and it's now facing away from me, but on the other side, everything's all right. All of its in-object orientation, its internal geometric integrity, let's say, is preserved. This stays intact regardless of how I rotate the clock. At least, that's the case until I bring a mirror in. But before that, let's recap. The clock, it's facing away, 12 is up, 6 is down, 3 is left, and 9 is right. And again, I'm reporting these positions from my perspective behind the clock. Now, if I want to see the clock face as it really is, I can use the old-fashioned method. That is, I can just turn it back around. We're still avoiding mirrors. Now, this is the important part. This is the whole point. To see the face of the clock, I'll need to reverse the z-axis somehow. I'll need to face it towards me. However, to do this in a natural way requires that I rotate the clock back around to face me, that I rotate its whole form all over again. Swiveling it around horizontally will re-reverse, if you see what I mean, the x-axis. As I swing it back around to face me, the 3 that was put on the left comes back around to the right, and the 9 that was on the right swings back into its place on the left. In other words, and this is the key point, starting with the clock facing away from me, to see the clock face as it really is requires that I reverse the x-axis and the z-axis. And this is what happens when I simply turn it around. Don't fret if I don't talk about options like turning it end over end just now. The conclusion won't require or endorse a bias. Okay, the clock is facing us. Let's move to the next step. Let's draw an imaginary line connecting the 12 to the 6. That vertical line is the clock's y-axis. Let's draw a second line that connects the 9 to the 3. This is our x-axis. Let's notice that right is exactly opposite left and top is opposite bottom. Those directions easily relate as simple opposites. But how do the two axes interrelate? Put differently, if I'm now facing the clock, if I'm at the top of the clock, how do I get around to the right side of the clock? The answer is pretty easy to see. I must go around 90 degrees clockwise. The interaxis relationship can be defined this way. This is important. When I face the clock, the right side of the clock is 90 degrees clockwise from the top of the clock. That's how the two axes, x and y, relate in the pre-reflected form. We're ready to go to the mirror. Okay, I'm turning the clock around just as I did before at the wall, but this time it faces the mirror. It's swiveled around, and I know I've kept the 12 at the top and the 6 at the bottom. The 3 and 9 are swung around backwards again as they were before. I'm showing the clock to the mirror that is showing the clock to me. What do I see? Let's remember our adage. The mirror does not reverse left and right or up and down. It reverses only front and back. But contrast that with what happened when I showed the clock face to myself manually by swiveling it back around. In that case, the rotation required reversed both the z-axis, the front and back, and reversed the x-axis, which swung around to fix the 3 and 9. Reversing the x-axis, if you like, is what the mirror should do in addition to reversing the z-axis, if, that is, it wants to present us with the clock face as it really is. By the way, I know the mirror has no moral obligations or desires. I'm using this language to convey a difficult idea. The idea is that when we say that the mirror doesn't reverse left and right or up and down, it sounds as though we are saying that it leaves the clock exactly as it is, at least along these axes, the x and y. Yet in truth, the consequence of showing us the clock as though it faced us, when it is facing away, switching the z-axis, without switching back the x-axis, normally done via rotation, has an xy interaxis consequence for the clock. We can see it. When I look at the clock in the mirror, its right side, the 3, is now 90 degrees counter-clockwise from its top, the 12. This isn't the consequence of the mirror reversing left and right, but rather the consequence of the mirror not reversing left and right, as we did when we rotated the object back to front. In terms of the bigger picture, if we're going to make sense of why the mirror apparently reverses left and right, interior to the form, we must understand that it changes the xy interaxis relationship of the reflected object by not reversing left and right, or up and down, when it switches the z-axis back to front. Properly, at this point, we cannot commit to the idea that the object, even with reference to its own vertical axis, is really left-right reversed. I can rotate the clock around like a steering wheel. When I put the 12 at the top and the 6 at the bottom, it seems like the x-axis is going the wrong way as compared to the pre-reflected clock. But if I rotate the clock around to fix the horizontal axis, putting the 9 at the left and the 3 on the right, the object looks like the vertical axis is the reversed one. It's upside down now. Interior to the object itself, neither option, up-down reversed compared to a righted horizontal, or left-right reversed compared to a righted vertical, seems more objectively compelling. This is why we carefully assert only what summarizes both effects. The interaxis relationship has been reversed versus the pre-reflected form. Its right is now 90 degrees counterclockwise from its top. Postscript. A concise summary of this episode's aims. When we look in mirrors, we see reflected objects. When these reflected objects are oriented so that their upside is up and their downside is down, they are left-right reversed as compared with their pre-reflected forms. Trying to understand this evident fact leads directly to two errors. Error 1. We might claim that since the reflected object is obviously presented to us left-right reversed, the mirror must reverse left and right. This is untrue if we mean by it that the process of reflection takes, metaphorically speaking, what is on our left and presents it to us on our right. Error 2. We might also make the opposite claim, the claim that since the mirror does not reverse left and right, as described above, the reflected figure must be, in relation to its own internal axes, x in relation to y, unchanged, that, as compared to its own up and down, it is not left-right reversed. But this is also untrue. Remember, the relationship between the reflected figure's top side and right side is now defined by a 90-degree angle counter-clockwise. This episode attempted to avoid both errors and to keep both facts, by demonstrating that the xy interaxis change in the reflected form can be understood as a logical consequence of preserving left and right while reversing front and back. Finally, the necessary caveat to all of this was that the claim that in object the reflected figure is left-right reversed and not up-down reversed is not here established. We conceded instead that since the figure is left-right reversed only if the vertical axis is prioritized as correct, but would be considered up-down reversed if the horizontal axis were prioritized as correct, all that could be safely claimed was that the xy interaxis relationship had changed. All of this was a step in trying to develop a rigorous answer to what I claimed was an outstanding question. Why does the mirror apparently reverse left and right but not up and down? Concluding, a reflected form, whose up is up and whose down is down, is not left-right reversed in relation to the form it is reflecting, but it is left-right reversed in relation to its own vertical axis. In this second sense, the mirror does reverse its left and right, just not by the means we initially suspected.